Thank you. Okay, well, it is 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 12th. We will call to order the meeting of the Financial Management Board. Let's take a roll call.
Adam Bauman will not be here this evening. Elaine Vincent.
Here.
Jason Rudlos.
Present.
Kevin Repchek.
Here.
Marty Basic. Not going to be reply.
That's an old list. I'm sorry.
I have Andrew. This is my old list. All right, Sam Ashbaugh. Not here as well. Terry Johnson.
Here.
Tom Provins. Is not here. He replied no. And then Andrew, you're here. Present. Okay. And Steve Silverman, Terry Winstein, and Andrew McCree from staff and commission are here as well.
So,
Yep.
So the first item is to review or adopt the minutes. Do I hear a motion? So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion is seconded. We'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? All right. Meetings are accepted. We'll open it up to citizen comments. Is there anyone on the line?
See, our vast audience does not look like it is. It's doing this to me here.
I guess we are the one participant.
I think it's actually today.
That's.
I don't know, ever since that first meeting and my wife got on, I've always waited to see what's here.
Yeah, I think we're the only one.
There appears to be no citizen participation. So we'll move to the next item, which is the chairperson's report. So not a report, but we've had some discussion about future ideas and sent an email out to the group, and I apologize for not saying that earlier, but just to kind of spur the discussion about some things that I think would be helpful. And I wanted to just sort of have a discussion about ideas, projects, potential projects based on what we've talked about so far. Some things that are in, the master plan, obviously at the direction of both Andrew and the council we've heard so far, and just have that as a discussion. So the things that I put up seem pretty straightforward. Some things that we talked about, I really liked when Andrew talked about the services that they've sold, particularly around finance, using their best in class skills to help other communities. Some other things that have come up are, other services. How do we combine efforts, whether that be internally and externally? Obviously, sort of the cost of maintaining this entity that is Mount Lebanon. So things like that. So I just opened up for group discussion, if that's okay.
So I guess going on with the master plan, I mean, is there a list of sort of like improvement projects Mount Lebanon, the commissioner sort of looking at, trying to decide which ones to fund and how to fund it? Or is it, sort of wait year by year and sort of you talked about the rain day fund and the storm system that needed to be addressed? Do we have a list of things you're looking for input on, I guess, is the.
I mean, we certainly have, the CIP, the capital improvements, but I was gonna mention my report talking about things commission is looking at, one of which is the South Garage. That's gonna be coming up soon, and that will be at some point a big ticket item. Right now, we've gone as far as approving an architect to start looking at ideas, costs, that kind of thing. So it should be on our radar. There's nothing yet for us to do, but it should be on our to-do list when that cycles around. It just, right now, we don't even have to say, pick option A or B. It's just, we have to do something.
Right. Is there a timeline that's?
Well, no more than 5 years max, and we want to get done much, much sooner than that because we're told we've got a 5 years life cycle on this left on the garage. And we don't want to wait until 4 years and 364 days.
Sure.
Now, we know it's gonna take time to get the architect, give some designs, get community input, all those sort of things. So we started that process now.
Who's the
But
architect?
bottom line, we'd like to try and get this thing, basically, it's gotta be demoed. And then what is gonna replace it? And that's gonna be part of that discussion. And that's part of the architect looking at feasibility and those sorts of things.
WTW is.
Yeah. I mean, it will have some sort of parking in that space, but then what else? Besides that, that's part of that community input of,
Sure.
what does Mount Lebanon, as in the residents think they want on that site besides parking. So that's a big item. Again, back to things on the list are, we talked last night, or Monday, excuse me, about electrical vehicle charging stations. Now, there's a program with Duquesne Light providing some money. One of the stations being looked at is over on the Academy lot. Another relates more to fleet charging, that'd be at the Public Works yard, and the other would be at the Public Safety building. And so far, again, commission's having discussions about, do we do it, how many should we do? Where are we on the process of even electrifying the fleet for police cars or dump trucks or any of that sort of thing? In the case of the Academy lot, that one of the things also being discussed is, well, rather than going through Duquesne Light and getting their discount, well, what if we use solar panels? And so Eric Milliron is working on that as far as, well, if we use solar panels for electricity versus Duquesne Light. So it's one of those things, again, back to, the idea of the list, that's gonna at some point come around. It's, I don't think we have anything quite there yet as far as, to vote, discuss. I mean, you may feel differently, but, these are just things that commission's gonna doodling on, if you will.
Just a quick question. So other than the capital expenditure of buying the hardware and getting it in place, is there an ongoing fee cost for that? Or you talked about a discount from Duquesne. I presume then that there's a cost associated with it.
Oh, yeah, there'd be obviously, cost of electricity and such. This is the installation fee. And for that installation fee, that's where Duquesne Light has said, we apply for money and we should be able to get that funding. It's just the idea of going, in the case of Academy, of going, well, do we want to try a solar panel there instead? We don't have any numbers yet, so that this group can look and say, but here's if we do solar, here's if we do Duquesne Light, start crunching some numbers.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a commitment of a number of years that we have to remain as a charging station
Right.
thereafter if you use Duquesne Light.
Right.
There's a full commitment.
Essentially an easement, what you've done.
Well, they put all the money into it and you've got to buy back the
Oh,
electricity
sure. Yeah, exactly.
for it.
Yeah.
So we went down that path with the south garage. We chose not to because they also dictate where you put it. The reason where it is in the south parking garage is twofold. One is where they wanted to put it, it was not wheelchair accessible or ADA accessible. As best we could, we wanted to make sure we were as close to the elevators. Well, they wanted it all the way in the opposite corner, so we couldn't do that.
Right.
Two, they wanted it on a certain floor so they can minimize the run, so on and so forth. So they dictate a lot when it comes to that, so that I think that to your point is we gotta weigh the pros and cons. Do we do it ourselves because we have the wherewithal to do so? Which we did, right? So a station putting in south garage, we could have put 2 or 4 ports, whatever we decided to do. We decided to do 2 ports, and it's been very successful, but regardless, we could have put both in ourselves.
Right.
I've done it, so.
Yeah. So,
Is there federal money for that?
well, there was discussion Monday night about possibility of a federal tax treatment. But, with November election, who knows how much that's gonna go out the window, so we'll have to see on that. But again, I want to just give the group a sense of what is being talked about more, I'll say. I can't even say short term because the garage is hardly short term other than we just approved funding for the architect Monday night. But again, these are the sorts of projects, I mean, again, this is a good luck with the notes because some is gonna be his report and some is mine. But for instance, we approved $188,000 for stairs at the end of Inglewood. It's a pedestrian project. Those stairs, that request was before I became a commissioner, so here, 12 years, and finally funding, so thank you. It's finally funding to do, so this summer, hopefully that project will be done, but that's an example of a pedestrian project that $188,000 was allocated. We talked, I believe, the last meeting about sidewalks. And that's something that commission talked about sidewalks, and the mobility board has already talked about for next year, what sidewalk work they want to see done. So that somehow that cost, whether we'll see that or how we'll see that. Some of the interactive of the new board structure, I'm
Right.
not exactly sure how that's gonna play out. But I know from a funding request that's coming for sidewalks.
Is there still a 10-year program on the sidewalks?
Yes.
Is there? Okay.
It's now 20.
But
I was
it's,
about to say it.
but it's a sort of, I mean, commission during the time I've been on commission, because at one point we were on year 20 of a 10-year program. Like, wait a minute, the math is not adding up here. And so I was pushed commission to say, let's spend more money to try and get ahead of it. Now, there's a certain amount of, you can only do it when the weather's warm. But we did allocate money for a second sidewalk crew, so at least we were able to make better progress on that list. So yes, that sidewalk exists, but that program is maintaining that which is out there as opposed to what you're hearing about with Woodlawn and other places saying this is extending, adding more sidewalk. So long answer, short question.
What about like traffic calming? I mean, certain areas are pretty well contained. I mean, obviously you think about here on Washington with all the crossing guards and schools. I think people generally respect that, but some areas seem to have better traffic flow and traffic patterns, traffic calming, rumble strips, whatever you call it. Some are just kind of a free for all. Is there a general discussion of that?
Well, the mobility board is gonna be looking
Okay,
at
yeah.
that sort of stuff, and again, back to ideas of be it narrowing roads or whatever to look at traffic calming projects. There's a process and procedure for that. So, you know, those requests go to that board. You know, I would imagine, again, back to we're in new territory here, how much of that then the dollars, does it come back, you know, more for Andrew, I mean, how much the dollars come back to us versus the dollars come back to commission or to the budget, but, and I'm not quite sure how that's exactly gonna play out here. We'll be aware of it, but I mean, we were supposed to focus on big projects like on your list of, is we're looking to say trash contract, another 5 years out kind of thing.
Right.
To think about as we move down the road to say, if we did it here, what would it cost? Do we, the idea is kind of teeing up some information for commission to have to make those decisions and say, do we want to spend for 3 new trucks and building a building or something like that? You know, so.
So who's looking at that?
Well, it should be us. It should be this board.
Well, I think, I'll just chime in here
Please.
for a second. So based on the priorities that were in the comp plan, I think that's where they wanted us to start for this board for sure. One of the things I think they really want us to look at early is the garbage contract. For a couple of reasons. One, I think again dovetail into a cooperative model, right? So we're not the only ones in this area that are dealing with the higher cost of trash collection. With a, 18, 19 within the Shaycog contract, we all saw it. Now, do I think we could replace the Shaycog side? No, I'm not suggesting that in any way, shape or form. But I think it would behoove us to look at it individually and as a co-op model. What would that look like? How much extra capacity would we have or not have? So on and so forth, so that folks like a Castle Shannon, a Dormont, even a Scott don't have the size enough to run a full fleet that could we slightly expand and still cover. I think those are things that we could absolutely do. So I think we need to put that to bed once and for all. It's been talked about now for well over 8 to 10 years. Once we knew things were happening where it was going to be very expensive for trash collection and recycling, we knew that at some point we need to put to bed whether we do it or not. I will tell you that we've talked to other municipalities. There's other ones that do it around us. West Mifflin does it, but they've done it for years. And there's some things that when you look at the financials, there's a way to look at it that goes, are they breaking even? Are they, how does this work, right? So there's a lot of things that can go in a deep dive from the revenue to the expense to the personnel to the infrastructure outside of trucks. just infrastructure within the municipality, where you store all this, you know, heavy machinery and stuff like that. So a lot of things that can go there. So I think it's a double edge there, so where we have, not only do we want to put that, but also the shared service side. So that would be my first thought of priority that could come of it.
And along the lines of that timetable, one, we're already have to think about, we have to make a decision within 4 years, even though it's a 5-year contract. we're
We have
already-
to make a decision within this 3 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, we're already in the contract, lead times.
As of
all that
2026,
thing.
we need to make the decision.
There you go, so 3 years.
Yeah.
You know, and the infrastructure thing is a big deal, because if, you know, we run all the numbers and go, great, so where are we gonna park these trucks? Where are we gonna put that building? You know, the numbers all work, except who's giving up their yard for, and so.
That's where the co-op model may come in, you know, and those types of things.
But so you with a co-op model, you gotta park them somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that becomes part of that challenge. And again, it may turn out to be, it's perfect, except everybody says, well, every other municipality is pointing at someone else to park the trucks. So we'll see.
So that's one from my side, I would say. Two is the debt structure. So I think this board can really help in that way, help the commission and myself is in the debt structure. And what I mean by that is we have 3 potential large debts coming. We have the South Garage, which will be some sort of, revenue bond of some sort. There will be, depending on how we change the framework of the parking and the model that is, there's gonna be needed support from this board to understand the projections and all those things. Second is the rec center. The commission has indicated that they would like to see I'd say conservatively, $12 to $14 million renovation down there. That's, I think, conservative, based on an existing building and the footprint that we're going into. I think it's gonna be between 12 and 14 million based on the projections they had. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was
I
between.
don't look like I'm twitching.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm hoping it's not that much. We were showed 3 different options. And certainly we need to do something. A building from the 1970s, there are things that just, the way it fits in that footprint, we can do better to maximize the space. I'm concerned about one of the proposals was to build an additional building out into Main Park. I don't know if there's commission support for that additional building or not. Obviously, you build it, you don't build it, that is part of that number. But even the 2 proposals we got just to redo the building that's down on that site. This isn't blowing it up and starting over again. It's like, not like getting rid of the ice rink. It's kind of building around and so forth. I remember being close to 10 million, but maybe I just, but it's back to Andrew's point. How much for the garage, how much for the rec center?
Yeah, I was thinking more of the 12 to 14 million, because when you're blowing up that site, meaning having that kerfuffle, you're most likely gonna be doing other things to Main Park at the same time, it's my guess. Knowing how we structure bonds and where we try and, if we're gonna disrupt a site, let's disrupt it once and get it all done. So I'm just, these are
And
ballpark numbers.
right, and the stuff we saw proposals for Main Park did not look as expensive, but to say, okay, if we're converting tennis courts to pickleball courts, it's not free. There's a cost there.
Correct.
If we're redoing the playgrounds, there's something. So you're right, if we're talking rec center plus full playground, then yes, those.
So that whole area and doing that, because that's part of the Main Park and Recreation Site Master Plan, right? So I'm thinking 12 to 14 million there. So that's another big one. And then you're gonna have another couple $1 million that's gonna be possibly in a debt structuring for Vibrant Uptown Phase 2. Right, we're calling it, what are we calling it? Calling it something different now.
We're not calling it something else.
We're not calling it, sorry, Eric, I apologize if I called it the wrong thing.
Visioning uptown, I'm trying to.
They're just in the planning stages of that, so you're probably more talking in the 3 to 4 years phase where we're talking about.
The third one?
The various projects that are coming that are a little bit smaller, that are smaller, that are kind of disparate around the community. So one being the Vibrant Uptown Phase 2, so that's
Example of that,
conversions
if I
and
may, is things like public art. placemaking. There are things that were proposed to us of ideas relating to, do we somehow put in some sort of, like exercise loop up there? The ways to activate Parsway, to integrate it more with, Washington Road. So that's kind of the laundry list, of what exactly works out, but that is gonna obviously generate some
And where
of those.
and where that timing comes in with that debt structuring, that would be an example of one of the projects that you're most likely not gonna be doing improvements there for less than $1 million, right? So what other things can you team up? In that time frame, you're gonna have the commissioning of another fire truck that will be coming up, so you'll team that up, and the same $650,000 fire truck we just got now costs 1.2 million in its 4-year lead time. Those types of things. So those are the things that,
And one more, the turf, because the turf is coming up to its end of life. So that's.
which is also lighting, and so you got those various projects to kind of lump together to make sure, so
Turf where?
The Wildcat Middle Turf, and it's 8 years, we're told 8-year lifespan. We're about year 6.
we're 10.
We're here to help.
As time flies.
Yes, 2014. That was put in 2014.
I'm in year 11. It's a bit of a blur.
Yes.
It's less of being involved before I started, boards and whatever else, so it's.
And one of the big questions there is to light the entire field. Which I'm
The last thing in CIP was for lighting the field. The estimate was $2 million. And it's like,
it's a big number.
and then ouch, and whatnot, it is or isn't. I mean, I know the residents in my ward, B. Lynn, are not gonna be too happy about the idea of lighting that. At $2 million, that's a big number. And what does the commission wanna do for that? So.
Well, and I think too, then that's where our board, that's why I'm mentioning it, is that our board can step in, help with the fee and consolidate or coordinate with Parks and Rec about what's the fee structure? Do we increase the fee structure to light that whole field, so on and so forth? And those types of things. So suffice it to say, I think the whole point of what I was trying to get at was there's some big debt coming, and we know it. There's some debt falling off, so it may behoove us to pull in those from this board that have that expertise and start timelining. Okay, once we get the go ahead that they're committed to, between this budget for the parking garage, what's our timeline? And how does the financial management board help with that? Are we RFPing are we gonna hire a financial advisor beforehand and recommend one, right, prior to this, so that they're ready in the wings when we're ready? Are we gonna go, negotiate it or public sale or an auction sale? So those types of things, and make sure we have that plan so that I think that could be a really asset to the commission and to the community, is to have that all lined up and teed up and ready to go. And not rely just on me, because the smaller issues, that's fine, I can take care of those, that's not, but we're talking about big issues here, so I wanna make sure that we're buttoned up best we can, because, that takes teamwork.
And I realize we're beta testing it live here, of exactly how this whole thing's gonna work. I think, like Andrew mentioned, these 3 projects, that how much of this board is gonna be asked for more, I'll say, global research. The commission ultimately has to decide, all right, we need 2 pickleball courts or 4 or something like that. So I feel like this group is more saying, if you want to borrow $12 million, this is the cost. If you're thinking about, okay, you want to do this down at the rec center or for the field, let's say, you want to do these lights here, with certainly some additional revenue from whatever. But it becomes, the commission that has to say, don't know how much, to give you an example that, there was a bond, the original borrowing included changing a couple of golf holes. Well, guess what? Eventually, the commission said that money's got to be put somewhere else. And so there's going to be a certain amount of that, which we can do here as finance to say, tee it up, and then commission is just going to have to make those tough calls for what gets included or not included, depending on.
Is there a cost bogey that we're looking to meet? So I'm gonna speak from my world,
Sure.
fighting for dollars in the Pentagon. So typically we'd go in and know that this is the dollar amount that we're looking to live within. So in FY this, that, or the other, umpteen million, umpteen million, umpteen million. We would know going in that these are the values we have to work within. And then you'd allocate that and prioritize underneath it. You'd have stuff that's above the line and stuff that's below the line. And so there's not an infinite amount of resources.
Correct.
So, what is the amount of resources we need to engineer underneath? Because I think that drives the question, what's the right way to proceed?
Right, and some of that is gonna be driven by, like the garage, some of the cost estimates to say, all right, we're doing the garage, if we pick, let's say, options A, B, and C, really start to get some ideas. Same thing we talk about of the rec center playground project, say, okay, it's 12, and we start to get that because some of that's gonna be that chicken or the egg. Yeah, we wanna give some guidance, but hey, if interest rates, the Fed drops interest rates, it doesn't, my point is to say, how much can we get for 12 million?
Yeah, I think it's.
And then it becomes some of those decisions, say, you can borrow 12 million, but this is gonna cost 16. Oh, or you can borrow 12, which means, oh, maybe we can do this or that. So I get trying to give some structure, but there are other things that it's just gonna have to see going through.
That's number one.
I would say when you say, is it number one? They all have to get done. It just, we have to start on this.
You got one A's, one B's, one C's.
Yeah, I mean, because, we just, it's just, I don't know, back to we may get in a situation where we're not demoing this, let's say, until year 3. But in year 2, we gotta buy a fire truck and worry about, the uptown stuff. So that's where it's, the exact deadlines, it's unclear. It's not so simple as like those steps going, okay, it's the 2024 budget. This is the money we have, we're gonna spend, allocate it, build it this summer. These bigger projects, it's a little more nebulous as far as, what exactly dates things are
Do
gonna
we do
start.
PERT charts and stuff like that here?
Say again?
Do we do PERT charts? Stuff like that where you tie program milestones to costs?
I would say not program milestones to cost so much as we do certainly look at things of going more specific projects. Take fiber uptown we just went through. We sort of look at that and say, well, what do we budget for it? What did the costs wind up being? We certainly have kind of that after action report to say, how do we do? So we certainly have those goals to try and get to a specific dollar number. But real world happens. It takes longer for whatever, light poles become more expensive and, that kind of thing. So we have certainly target numbers. We try and hit those target numbers. But it's, I know I sound like that slippery politician, but it's sort of going like, you do your best to forecast and reality happens. And that's where we start with that. Here's what we're trying to do of these projects. Then it's, okay, what do we think it's gonna cost? And then that, and then back to, what are collections? What does commissioner want to do? Can we get, let's say, on Vibrant Uptown, we'll eventually think of what we're calling it, but the idea is that public art, maybe people say, I'll donate that. Well, okay, then we don't need as much money. So that's where, again, adjusting to what happens on, as things move along.
At what number does our bond rating go down? I mean, that has to be an issue too, right? In terms of how much debt as a community we have outstanding.
We do not want our bond rating to decline.
Right.
We'll
So
not
what's
do
the
that.
number? Do we know the number?
No, there's not, they don't do it in that capacity, but yes, to your point, they look at certain metrics like debt per capita. Being $1,000 a person or under is usually a good benchmark. The bigger things they're looking at these days, is your assessed value. That doesn't help that we have a county that doesn't reassess.
Money on that person.
Yeah, that doesn't help us. Because I think we could show, and that's where we get on the rating call and thoroughly explain away that the assessed value does not determine how our private home values and what the home values are, and so on and so forth. But, so there's a lot of different, but yes, taking out large capacity, but also we have a lot of debt falling off. And so that's, to Steve's point, I think Steve's right in the fact that, hey, things can change, but what I would like as we talked about, of things that this board can do and really help, is creatively structure, what kind of structures can we give the commission so that when they're ready to pull the trigger on a $12 million rec center or a $15 million public-private partnership, and what does that look like and how it comes in, is to make sure that we have those ready for them. So it's not just me with a consultant. Right, because that's what, smaller issues, that's okay, because there's finite projects, this can be thorny. With a public-private partnership that they're discussing, that there's a possibility of that over here.
Sure.
How does the financing come within us and those types of things, and that's where the experience to draw on this board to say, okay, this is how you would recommend a structure. This is the size you think you should do. This is how you maybe do it in a couple phases, as you get more information in, about, we're not gonna need money in the first, we're gonna need X amount of dollars in the first year, and then we go out again for, and team it up and so on and so forth. So those are the types of things to be creative, and dynamic within that, and then also to talk about the structure of what do we do financial advisor wise, and what do we do with the underwriter, right? So, what types of things are we gonna recommend for these large issues? It's been a long time since we've been this large in the market. In the next couple of years, we haven't been this large. It's probably
When
been,
you say that, what does that mean?
so typically we've been under 10 million, and we haven't taken debt in 3 years? 21? No,
No,
20.
we
It was
were
4 years. 4 years ago, we hadn't been in the debt market. And prior to that, we hadn't been a large issue over 10 million in over a decade. So it's been a long time since we've issued this letter, so we need to, step into it with the help of this board, and so that'd be my recommendation
that's-
for
That's like
Project
capacity
take on.
and complexity. I mean, a lot of people can do $10 million. Very few people can do 20 million. Not very many people can do 100 million.
correct.
So when you talk about this, one of the things that'd be helpful to have is like, you have your schedule, right? So whenever these things falling off, and what's sort of the payments, and
Yep.
are there any balloons or other events that come along the way? Is
I
there?
can send that along, that's not a
Yeah,
problem.
is there like a historical spend or trend, like you said, okay, we do this every 5 years, or we have done this every 5 years or 10 years or something like that? Is there?
Andrew can do that. this
Yeah,
week.
yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but just to help.
Yeah,
Like,
sure,
we have a great idea, and you're like, that would be going against everything we've ever seen. And then are there, from a commission and even citizen or staff input, is there a bias toward a certain model? You mentioned, obviously, there's pure public, there's public-private, there's so do you have is this a preferred model? Is it all ideas, things like that?
Well, like the South Garage, we're
Sure.
looking at the public-private,
Good,
if we
okay.
can do a public-private,
Yeah.
partnership, great, and we're certainly exploring that. So that's sort of blue sky research, if you will.
Got it.
We'll see how it actually works out, but we're certainly open to that sort of thing. In the case of the rec center playground, we're not looking at that,
That's
public-private
both
sort of thing,
yeah.
it's mostly, it's just not.
Okay.
Same thing with, back to mentioning about, the name will come to what we're calling other than Vibrant Uptown Part 2. But what I was mentioning is that with public art, if someone, when you think about the sculptures you see down in Bridgeville, those very lifelike sculptures.
Yeah, that's a great.
If something like that, or someone said they want to donate that. Okay, but how much and how's that taken care of? And so when that's something like that comes to be, we shall see. Are we open? Yeah, sure. We do like those leveraged finance opportunities. So if those sorts of things come into play, we look forward to those. But there may be something we're just not even aware of that helps you all.
Got it. And then the last question is, you did mention about, picking your consultants, advisors. Obviously, you've got history with everybody from the pension fund to local banks and everything. Again, you talk about size. Are there preferred partners that we need to be thinking of, or is this sort of an open to best practice or?
Open to best practice, I would suggest we do an RFP for a financial advisor and have this board interview.
Yeah.
That's what I would suggest.
I just know how parochial things get, and just
Yeah.
be careful with that.
We're not that way here. We're,
That's what makes Mount
I'm from
Lebanon special.
Louisiana,
is
everything's
because-
parochial.
Yeah, correct,
So,
yeah.
And look, in Allegheny County, we have so many
Yeah.
school
absolutely.
districts and municipalities, but, you know, I think that's one of the things that makes Mount Lebanon special is because of the things that we do here of going, think outside the box. It's not, well, I wanna get so-and-so's brother's cousin, no, it's, send out the RFP, let's see who applies.
Good. I mean, does that sound like a good place to get some of that information to go on and then we'll go back? I mean, obviously, we're just starting the discussion and sort of every time I hear Andrew talk, I'm like, the mind starts to explode because you've got so many ideas and then you hear, you know, obviously, what the commission has to say and it's sort of a whole new thing. So.
I don't wanna make it sound like we're adversarial.
No, I don't think it is as such. I think it's more like there's so many ideas and so many needs. And it's still, as you said, very nebulous as to when and how much and how. But at some point, every day that ticks by, it's gonna become more and more necessary to have some decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Sam may have a good primary lead in the debt side.
yeah.
He may be someone I team up with and say, board kind of head of that piece, maybe Sam may be a good person to do that.
Certainly yeah. I mean, obviously, we talked about that as having that sort of ad hoc nature, and I
Yeah.
think without him being here, we'd love to.
But I'll get on the horn with him and say, hey, this is what we talked about,
That's
let's.
the meeting we volunteered to.
Yeah.
Just for that, piece, someone else to take
Yeah.
the other side of it, but I think he would and probably enjoy doing that, making sure that we're given his experience, so.
And those subcommittees we talked about, much like pension, we talked about that being a subcommittee, but this becomes a subcommittee of the group as well.
And I think we should discuss that at our next, probably August meeting, is how we then divvy that up.
Yeah.
As we'll have Perry in for August.
Oh, okay.
Perry will be here, so it'll be the second, so you have two, and then should divvy up after that, I think. Very least. So those are my two that I wanted to make sure we maybe
I
started.
got more than
started
two
on.
after that. It might be five.
We have to go back to
Yeah.
the tape and.
The math doesn't math. Okay. Again, I know that we sort of mixed items 3, 4, and 5. Are there any other thoughts on what we're trying to do, just some of the discussion, objectives, any other questions? Discuss with that?
Are there other parks and fields that are on the agenda anywhere? Like, I know we talked about Main Park, like what about Bird Park or like that soccer field? Which it's terrible drainage, or like, like just other things like that where, it doesn't necessarily, it's not, you can't really tag it onto the main park. It's not the same area, but like there might be other.
Yeah, and the Parks Board now, the Recreation Board, the idea is encouraging the board, the Parks Board used to do that, in sports as well. Here is the kind of the wish list, and these are the big projects, these are the small projects. And that bubbles up to commission, and what that is, we want to add a tennis court or the pickleball courts on the sports side. Parks to say, all right, is there something we want to do to modify a park, that kind of thing. And so some of that during the course of the year, we'll get that and they'll appear in the budget as a request of that sort of thing. How much of that comes back to this board, I'm not sure. I think it's going to depend on things of how much. If it's a smaller dollar item, does that just fit into the yearly budget? If it's a bigger project, is that something? One of the things, for instance, pickleball courts. We have the pickleball courts over at North Meadowcroft. There's no fee for that. Well, if we put them over at the rec center and we say, well, now we're charging a fee, how much, and so whether or not that touches this board or not, we'll see, but it's a long answer to your question, but that board, they review all the parks to see, okay, what we need to do, what can we improve? That's where like sports was always the same way as well, looking to say, what opportunities were there. And I've said it before, there are many good projects that come before commission at budget time. We can't fund everything. Someone mentioned about the finite resources. No one I know has a printing press in their basement that prints money. And if they do, don't tell me. I don't want to know. my point is that, there are many, this year, the steps, 12 years for that to get funded. It's sometimes there's just good projects, we said, we just can't do it this year. It'll be on the list, we'll see. It doesn't mean we're blowing it off, it's just in trying to juggle the priorities.
Plus the school district owns half the fields.
Yeah.
More than half the fields.
Yeah.
Elaine, I think to your point, I think you were asking, where are they at, kind of priority wise, maybe?
Priority wise,
Um,
and then like, as you're looking at things like that, there can be obviously efficiencies gained if you're looking to do something similar across multiple areas, for example, right? You're gonna get a construction equipment out here, you're gonna get a company that's gonna come out and, I don't know, regrade something, right? Are there other places that we can need to do that, where we could have, some efficiency there? That was another reason I was asking.
Well, you mentioned that, right, there's separate ownership of things. That's what was one of the first things that popped in my mind is why do we have separate ownership? Why is everything not everybody's? But that's a whole different.
Yeah, I don't think.
Well, and to that
Yeah,
point,
it's a-
the commission is going to have a meeting with school board for those sorts of things, saying, what can we,
Fine.
yeah.
We don't need
Yeah.
separate facilities. We don't need separate management. We don't need separate this, separate that. It's, like you said, that's an opportunity to show leadership in the area of not having duplication of effort.
Right, they've said they want to meet with us, we want to meet with them, now it's setting up time and walk through the details.
I mean, because when I had younger kids, I mean, if you did anything, any kind of travel, sports.
Yeah.
The field envy your kids experience when they go anywhere else.
It's just, that was week
Insane.
one for me.
Yeah.
So that's every.
Yeah, but I mean, having said that, turfing Middle and Wildcat or whatever it's called now was a huge improvement in terms, that thing is used 12 months of the
Yeah, it
year,
is.
all the time. I mean, that was really, really significant from an improvement standpoint.
And so why I mentioned that, Elaine, just to circle to where I was kind of going with your point. So, a couple things. One, we have the CIP coming out. Two is the Parks Master Plan did cover some of this, into what those were, what those things were. And to the final, the cooperation with the school district. I think, there are some fields that if you put some infrastructure into it, and put some money into it, I think you would see it be used a heck of a lot more. And those are where the team up of resources, hey, we're all the same tax dollar here, whether it's 29.3 on their side and 4.5 on ours, it's all coming out of your pocket, so.
This year.
Right.
The one I just got is one check.
Yes, you're welcome for that.
Yeah.
I've never seen one before, so that's,
What's that?
I've never had it. First tax bill, so.
Okay, there you go. Congratulations, you're welcome.
You'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
It was not as bad. I was planning for the worst,
Yeah.
hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Closer to best than worst.
That was something we did this year, so that was good, but so to your point, that's coming, with the CIP. I know there's some big projects within there. One is Bird Park that you mentioned and some of those other ones. So we'll make sure we have that for you, at the August meeting. I'll give you a copy of the CIP, there as well, so you can see that, and see how that.
And in the CIP, priorities are also listed by the department.
Okay.
And the sport advisory boards and such, so that you see where they're being recommended.
And the other is just an FYI, is that the group has not seen the budget from last year. Again, I feel like the CIP and the budget are so hand in hand, so you get a sense of obviously what we funded and why, but it's not just what's above the line, what's below. So again, some of that, okay, it's, how the pieces go together. And that's gonna take some time as we walk through the process here.
I've got an acronym alert, CIP. Capital improvement.
5-year capital improvement.
Thank you. Don't worry, keep asking.
I think you've got plenty of acronyms.
I got one.
We need to have like, if you write them down, we'll write them.
Let's go, let's see, pick up an acronyms that we don't, you can't ask questions about.
Confusing, so.
So, since I got mine, have the floor, yes. So we've been talking about the trash collection contract, 1, South Garage 2, Rec Center 3, various 4. Is there documentation regarding each of those that's shareable now? Or is it being requested for us to pull that together to make recommendations? Or is it yes and no on some of them?
Yes and no on some of them. I think each individual, the first one with the garbage side is a whole big project that needs to be a champion and segment out how we're gonna look at that. To look at the financial side of it. We're not even talking about the operation side. We're just talking about pure finances. Because we're gonna need to pull in public works for operational piece, the infrastructure piece and all that stuff, but just pure numbers, does it work? And then we pull them in would be my recommendation, but.
And on that, there at least are some numbers already you've got.
Sure, that's why I'm saying it's yes and no. I
So,
mean, we can tell you what we currently pay and that's the number we're trying to get to and we know what we're paying in 5 years.
Can we get at any of the, you said that others have done this already, like we don't need to reinvent the wheel, assuming they've already done some of that analysis.
No, and what I'm saying is others are doing it now.
Now,
And
okay.
have done it
It's
for
not there.
umpteen years and have never outsourced it.
Got it.
Yeah, so, but the other projects, I think,
Well, that's hard problem number one.
that's hard problem number one, right? And that's in the CIP, or the CIP, the comprehensive plan.
And
Okay, so
there's
that's a priority they wanted us to take a look at the financial management board level, was to look at that pure hard finances of taking it in. You know,
But
the
also.
labor costs, personal.
I mean, but also when commission was reviewing trash contract proposals, well, that helps the group to see when we were going through those numbers to get a sense of, here's what decision points we were faced with.
Mhm.
And maybe you look and go, I don't need this. I'm a big believer in give you the backstory to say, here's at least the numbers and so forth. The commission was faced with those decisions. So you're kind of that jumping off point as we get more information, to your point of cost of labor and all that with public works. So at least that, we have some of that we can provide.
Mhm.
In the case of South Garage, nothing. I mean, we're not to the, we don't have a number we can give to the group yet.
But you have options, do you not?
Not yet.
We have
For
an
South
ordinance.
Garage, not yet. I mean, we got to the just, I think we had a memo which said, in effect, here's a ballpark cost to demo it, here's a ballpark cost to build a new one. But that's kind of it. There's just, the headlines, but nothing underneath. As we move forward in the process, the group will get that information. But some of this back to the yes and no. Same things on like the rec center playground. We're getting wonderful pictures and so forth from consultant. But other than again, the ballpark presentation, well, how do you feel about if we do the rec center options A, B, and C? And this is kind of a ballpark. That was 1 3-page memo. But as far as the other stuff, the park and the that's not been quantified yet.
Well, while I agree with you that that's all accurate and I'm in agreement with you. But what I'm saying is that I think things happen fast and I don't want this board to be felt left out.
Right.
So ballpark numbers for now can start to be plugged in to say, okay, here's our debt service schedule. Here's what our plan would be if we're 18 months out, right? From, like if you said, okay, we issue the RFP, we have the feasibility study and it's feasible. Okay, then you gotta go out and design the darn thing, right? And you gotta pay for that. That's gonna take X amount of, so we can start doing that ballpark wise of saying timeline wise, okay, so now what I would suggest is that we then, as the financial management board, say, okay, if it's a $15 million parking garage, how do we structure this? When do we engage the advisor? Do we already have an advisor on board? What's your recommendation there? What's your recommendation for structuring the debt, right? Do we do it, a flat debt structure? Do we front load it, back load it? Do we do balloon? There's other things we can do with that. What have we seen in the market for revenue type bonds? If we decide to go revenue bonds, all that research can be done prior to knowing the final number. We can then plug in, if it's 17 million, we think it's gonna be, or if it's gonna be 13 million, we can plug that number in. But all those, suffice it to say, is to get that timely, say, okay, this is what we recommend as the financial management board and deliver that to the commission as deliverable. I think is where I was going.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think just when you're looking maybe for more specific numbers and to
I'm just wondering if there's anything.
we can give you some of the ballpark stuff we've received.
I'm dying to get up on the whiteboard and start drawing a PERT chart. You're just, charting this out because, so new guy, new to all this stuff. I'm looking at project, you got project A, gonna start someday, it's gonna end someday. The money side, I couldn't give a rat's ass about, that you got financial folks that know that sort of stuff. But I've run enough major projects to know that you started and you ended. And then there's planning time in front of it. So how much planning time do we have?
Right.
And then you have the other thing laying on top of that. You got your third thing laying on top of that. In order to get there, you gotta prioritize and figure out which one of those you're gonna do. What's the mechanism by which we down select? From each one of these, we'll probably have 3 or 4 choices. What's the mechanism by which you make that choice?
And
Is
I would
that a
say,
financial
I would
choice?
say more the mission of this board is this, which you just said you don't care about. Because that's more of our focus here is to, as Andrew said, going through all those finance things. It's not to say what you're suggesting is unimportant, because obviously we've got to.
No, I'm not saying that I'm
Having gone
saying
through
I'm
the circus of the Vibrant Uptown project, all that stuff of time and deadlines is very important. The idea for this group is what Andrew is saying, look, starting with the ballpark is saying, we know we're gonna have to pay something for the south garage. We need to be thinking about that finance aspect, and that's more of our mission, with this group. We've got these 3 bond issues coming up. Those questions about finding bond counsel, that's more the mission of this group. And again, I'm not dismissing, your concern, just what our mission, what we're tasked for,
And that's what I'm trying to figure out,
yes, is
the mission.
finance. And that's the idea, and I think Andrew did a good job explaining the financial minutia that this board is going to be spending an awful lot of time with.
I assume the public-private part of that would be like putting housing above the garage.
Well, it's the sort of thing of, what is that? Is it gonna be housing? Is it gonna be a hotel? Is it gonna be, people have talked about, they want a grocery store.
Yeah,
You know-
I walked around and somebody pulled me and said, do I want a grocery store above the garage? I remember.
And so that's part of that, and then say, okay, what we want, what's available, how that eventually turns out, not sure. We had some folks here, some architects, and kind of spitballing ideas. And they were what was the term? They said it should be, they recommend hospitality be on the top level. Now, hospitality could be a hotel, could be a restaurant, and so that's where we're going, okay, and that's where we're trying to get to some of that. So right now, it's just early in kind of the visioning process. And that's where, to your point, there is a specific, we have to hit certain bogeys because we've got to get the new garage built before the old one falls down. That's a different mission than to say, how are we gonna pay for it? And that's really more of our goal here to say, when commission's like, we gotta figure out how to pay for these different ideas. And here it is, we may turn out that we're trying to fund, a $12 million project versus a $20 million project, but if that 8 million of that 20 is coming from private, okay, what do we do? But that's, I know it's a bit frustrating to be exact and precise, but it's kind of nebulous too, because we don't know what the exact number is. So there's a little patience that we ask from the group, because we just, as Andrew said, there's some ballpark numbers at this point.
Any other thoughts or things that we need to address today?
I think the more data we get, the more fun.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have some of those, like, show me where you've been before, let's come comfortable. Okay, so that's a great start.
That's the backstory I'm talking about. And you may go, please, enough.
No, that's fine.
But I feel
You're
like
right.
I
I'd rather that be the
I,
case.
as a commissioner, having seen all this stuff, I'm happy to, until you say stop.
Thank you.
And if they get all these memos, okay, if it's helpful, and by the way, when you get all this stuff, tell us what's helpful and what's not. We're just trying to aim the information fire hose out and tell us what's helpful.
Next, I think all of us joined this board to do some work, to get into the weeds and,
Well, I think,
be a good source of,
yeah,
a sounding board and, a research arm and things like that.
because I think a good example is the 2026 budget. Right, we're probably not doing this for the 25 budget because the rec center stuff's not done. But if we do our diligence here, this next year, we're sitting here in this board, we have a finalized or a report to be delivered and deliverable in June of July of 26 budget to say, if you want to run a $8 million bond, a $12 million bond, or a $16 million bond, here's the effects, here's my timeline, here's the millage impact. Here's all these things, because we know this stuff's coming, right? And we know that maybe we'll most likely have more information about the south garage and how that works and dovetail that into the 26 budget, because we're really talking about a 26 budget. Is that those impacts and how we do that within it, because I don't know, the manager has talked about possibly doing a bond in 25, but I don't know if we'll be ready. I don't know if we'll be ready. I don't know if we have those projects lined up yet. I don't know that answer.
And
I'm not the manager,
But
but
in 26, 27,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So 26 is the early.
Because let's say, because of, like my rep had the fire truck term, that may be the 2026, 2027 is the garage. Or it's the rec center, 28's the garage,
It's a different funding source. We get into all of that and get all of that minutia, but that's kind of what I'm for that project. And we have the other with the waste management side, with the refuse and recycling. I think those are two huge reports that can come out of this board to do that research. To see two different focuses, but I think there'd be a lot of value within that to start with this board.
I appreciate everybody's comments and discussion. Obviously, we mixed a lot up here. Anything to add?
I think that's.
we covered it, okay. Just want to make sure we addressed it. Anything else to add from the?
Yeah, I just want to let know this board know that we got our five-year pension audit back, since we last met. Everything was clean for all four of our, state, auditor general that audits our pension plans. We have 3 defined benefit plans and 1 defined contribution plan that's audited by the auditor general. 5-year audit is a big one. So, our defined benefit plans are some of the biggest for our size municipalities or municipality size in the state. So, so kudos to everybody that in my team and, that really gets that done. So.
One thing, probably, just as we talk about something in commission talking about of electrification of the fleet and what's that gonna cost and so forth. We're not there yet. It's just one of those things where right now it's being collected. What vehicles do we have? What options? But at some point that I suspect will come back to us as well, to look at, it's just on that great to-do list. Is we're looking to say, well, how much do we spend? Do we, one thing is the golf course. Do we want to electrify those golf carts? Well, if you do that, where's the charging station? How much? Where do you put it? Eventually I expect that'll somehow, in some way, we'll see that.
Yeah.
How much sports sees, how much we see, not sure.
All right, well, I appreciate the updates. Any old business to discuss? Okay, new business. To add for next meeting. I know we've discussed, it'll be the next one about when the next meeting will be, so I just want to make sure we're clear. Do we have anything? I think we've got plenty to noodle on in terms of what's been discussed. I'd like to continue if there's side discussions in between, just because that's when things tend to come to me, is not the meeting. Okay, we'll go from there.
I think you need a formal discussion about
Yes.
to cancel or not cancel the next meeting.
I'm gonna get to that.
No, it was new business, so I
Yes,
thought.
well, there's the announcement of the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
There's no like actionable items, I guess, for next meeting at this point.
I was gonna ask the
Like,
same
it's like
thing.
Yeah.
getting information and probably start reviewing it.
I think the action items are for the things we asked about from the staff, about history, about the sort of a Gantt chart of what's coming, what's going, money in, money out, the drop off of any bonds, some historical budgets and spends and trends. Anything else to ask for? I assume we could share that on SharePoint. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Unless you see any time bombs coming up.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
I was also going to give you a typical kind of, once we have the projects identified, how fast they move.
Sure. That'd be helpful.
So that's why I think us having that plan ahead of that being ready to go will be helpful.
I think it's a good point because most of us are private industry, and that works one way. For-profit works one way, not, and then there's municipal, so, and then there's the behemoth that Terry comes from, so they probably got it all covered.
Yeah.
Yeah, municipal government is designed to be slow.
Yeah.
In part to give people a chance to comment on stuff. So, yeah. Nature of the process.
So let's have a discussion about the next meeting. I know we touched on it before. I think that what I'm understood as general consensus is July probably makes sense to skip that meeting and move to August based on what commission's doing as well as sort of vacation schedules. So, okay, got a motion. Is there a second? Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries pretty easily. So
It's August 14th.
so we will move to, instead of July, we'll move to August 14th. Okay, great. So plenty of time to do our research, come up with new ideas, have a discussion. And we can certainly have, that side discussion about, if there's some informal things between meetings. All right, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn?
I hear a motion in a second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, the meeting's adjourned, 7:01 p.m.
Good. So you got your first round of applause.
That's right. I would say that's like the first time anybody said, thank you guys very much. Well, good. Thank you. Appreciate the discussion. Thank you for the extra side,
I'm happy to.
extra backstory and
Yeah, tell me when to stop.
Andrew, Terry. I particularly enjoy your faces when we start talking about timelines. I didn't notice 10 years, 15 years.